When I was 17 years old, I got to spend time with my grandfather the last few months of his life. And he had cancer. I remember watching him struggle to make sense of his own mortality. I remember watching how, in confronting a finite amount of time, he was forced to reflect on his life as a whole. One day he was sitting in his favorite chair staring out the window when he started to cry. My mom said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "No, I'm not." And she said, "Do I need to call someone?" And he said, No, it's not that. It's just that I've lived 84 years and I don't know what this life is about, and there isn't enough time to fix it. A few days after his death, I found an old black and white photograph of him in his mid-20s. He was fishing in Florida, and in the picture he's standing on a pier, tall and proud on a pier. And behind him, the Atlantic Ocean just stretches to the horizon. Beside him, between two posts, are fish that he had caught hanging. And above him, the Florida sun is just beating down on his face. And he's got this look on his face in the picture that says he's right there. He's right there. He's living life. He's in the moment. He's nowhere he'd rather be. And as I sat there at that time, looking at the photograph, I became disoriented by the contrast between his youthfulness in the picture and the image I had of him in my head before he died. And the more I looked at the picture, the more I couldn't reconcile how one reality became the other. Where was the disconnect? And the more I continued to look at the photograph, I had this kind of surreal experience. The photograph became almost like a mirror. I saw myself in his youthfulness. And I realized in that moment that he was once how I was now. Which led me to infer the obvious, that I too would become what he became someday. An image in a fading photograph tucked away in a box. Now this is kind of depressing, right? And not the typical 17-year-old really doesn't want to be thinking about this. And I did not want to be thinking about this. But at the same time, I couldn't shake it off. There was something about it that cut right to my core. And most of all, I didn't want to, at some point in the future, be sitting in a chair, staring out a window, crying because I didn't know what my life was about. So I started to more deliberately ask the kind of questions that define what we are as human beings. And we say things like human being and we don't think twice about it. And in class, I bring this up all the time. We don't say dog beings. We don't say plant beings. We don't say table beings. So there's something special about being a human being. And I think what's special is that we have this intense desire to understand why we're here. If any of you have pets, a dog for instance, I doubt, and I think you would probably agree, that at no point has your dog woken up in the middle of the night in a panic, oppressed by this diminished sense of meaning and purpose in its life. And yet we do, and we all have. Every person in this auditorium at some point has deeply questioned, why am I here? And even though this type of questioning defines what we are as human beings, too often we turn our backs. We turn our backs on this type of questioning. I had a professor who used to say we live in a culture of denial and distraction. He would say it all the time. And I think we do distract ourselves from what unsettles us. And nothing unsettles us more than the passing of time. And so we hide. We distract ourselves in computers, in our phones, in each other, in material possessions, in routines and to-do lists. And but ultimately, there's no person, place, or object that can save us from our own existence. And I think if we're not careful, as I learned by observing my grandfather, that we'll spend too much of our time distracting ourselves and not enough time actually living. And living, I guess living in the sense of living more fully, I think requires that we harness time, the passing of time, instead of hide from it. And use it as an opening and kind of as a pathway into our innermost depth. And it's this notion of an opening and depth that well-being poetically illustrates. A few years ago, I was starting research for my dissertation on education and well-being when I had this epiphany. I suddenly realized the obvious, that well is not only a state of being or a feeling, but it's also a hole in the ground that we draw water out of. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. So being the English teacher that I am, on a Friday night, I dove into the Oxford English Dictionary to see what particular usage came first. And the physical well came first, and then a little over 400 years later, St. Mark used it poetically to describe a person's presence. And I thought this was beautiful. And then I started thinking about, and I think we can all realize this, that if we think about people that we know that embody wellness, the poetic parallel does justice, right? These are people who have depth. These are people who are connected to a source. These are people who, in their presence, we feel abundance. We feel the overflowing of life. We draw from them like water from a well, something that's life-giving, life-affirming, life-sustaining. And the more I started thinking about this as an educator, I was like, this is awesome. This is unbelievable. Why isn't this a part of educational discourse? And so I started thinking about how is it that we can create these kinds of experiences where we can help individuals uncover within themselves that wellspring, that connection to the source. And I think it starts by first recognizing that this isn't a science issue. This isn't a medical issue. It's not a numbers game. There's no paint-by-number formula for this. There's no blood test we can take that'll say you're this level well. There's no amount of torturing ourselves on a treadmill. There's no weight on a scale. There's no amount of wheatgrass juice shots that we can take to achieve this. And so where does that leave us? And I think it leaves us in a place where we start by elevating our consciousness, our awareness, and becoming aware of the times, the places, the activities that uncover within us that sense of connection, that connection to the source. Experiences that we pursue as an end in themselves. Albert Borgman calls these focal moments. Moments that bring into focus the meaning of our lives. Moments where the distance between who we are and who we want to become is closed. The second thing I think we can start doing once we become more aware of these moments and help kids become more aware of these moments is more deliberately incorporate them into our schedules. Too often, I think we use time, or we have an instrumental relationship with time. We use it as a means to some other end. And I see this all the time with students, that we engender this bad habit, and I'm guilty of it, that we wish time away. All the time, students will say, I can't wait till this week's over. I can't wait till the exam is over. I can't wait till the semester's over. I can't wait until it's summer, till I'm a senior, till I'm in college, till I get a job, till I get married, right? And we get in this habit of wishing our lives away. But at some point, as I saw my grandfather, we're going to wish we had the time we wished away. The average healthy adult in the contemporary world lives about, or has a lifespan of about 30,000 days. 30,000 days. 30,000 opportunities to practice. 30,000 opportunities to explore and express meaning and purpose in our lives. 30,000 opportunities to make our lives beautiful, to make our lives a work of art. Thoreau said to affect the quality of the day is the highest of the arts. and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, some artists create paintings. Some artists create sculptures. But the highest artist is the artist that carves and paints the very atmosphere and medium through which we experience the world. And I think this is getting at what it means to be well. It's realizing that time, our most valuable resource, is non-renewable. And once we recognize that, we have that sense of urgency to determine for ourselves what's worth our time, what's central and what's peripheral. In closing, I had the opportunity in college to study Buddhism abroad. And I came into contact with this particular saying from a 13th century Zen master, Dogen Zenji. And every time I have heard this saying, I think of my grandfather. I think of the look he had on his face when he was standing on that pier. And I wonder, had he heard this phrase, or at least internalized its meaning at some level at a young age, would he have, when he was in that chair staring out the window, could he have also had that face instead of have been crying? It's called the great matter. The great matter is birth and death. Life slips past and time is gone. Wake up, wake up. Do not waste time. Thank you.